Welcome to the Faith and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Elle Edwards, mental health champion, positive psychology geek, and founder of the Faith and Business Playground. Join me each week as I talk openly about mental health, the dark side of entrepreneurism, and bring you Bible-friendly tools, support, and resources to help you heal from depression so you can actually be as happy as you think you should be. In today's episode of the podcast, we are thinking about those times when you are ready to make a change. And this is a process that I go through with one-on-one clients, but it's something that I want to introduce you to as well, because regardless of whether we're working one-on-one or not, there are things that you can be doing and there are steps that you can be taking. But it all starts by getting your head in the right place, which probably won't surprise you as the mindset geek, the positive psychology geek. It's all, I've said before, this game is won or lost in your head. So it starts by getting your head in the right place. But when you've got to that point where you're fed up of being fed up, when, rock bottom maybe feels a little bit too dramatic a way to describe it, but you're feeling guilty because you're not as happy as you think you should be. And this pressure that you have because on paper, everything's fine and you should be happy and content with your life, but you're really not. And you're having more bad days than good days and more days where you're feeling angry and frustrated at the world than you are delighted with the world. That's when it's time to start thinking about, right, okay, is this really how I want to be living out the rest of my existence? Because ultimately, we just want to be happy. Whatever happy looks like for each of us. And that is something we're going to be digging into in Friday's episode of the podcast. But regardless of what happy looks like for you, my guess is that if you're feeling pretty fed up right now, that's not the way that you want to live your life. Like you didn't, when you think back to when you were a kid and what do you want to do when you grow up? You didn't go, oh, I want to get married, have kids and be miserable. Nobody chooses that. And yet somehow life happens and we get into this place where we just exist from one day to the next. And, being a grown up can be quite frustrating and quite depressing. And the realities of mortgage and got to do the washing. And like my children now, they're like 2 teenagers and a 12-year-old nearly 12-year-old. And I mean, I can't get over how many clothes we get through, like 2 loads of washing at least a day and all this grown-up stuff. When did we sign up to being grown-ups? And so it can all get really frustrating and one day you can merge into the next. And if that's you, if that's your reality, maybe you've come to the point where you're thinking, okay, I've had enough of this. It's time to make a change. Now, I'm a firm believer. My philosophy and where I come from is that for me, it's not about doing more. It's not about loading your already overstuffed to-do list with more things to check off. Instead, I'm about getting you to a place where you can see and recognize the delightful moments in regular day-to-day life. Because the reality is, there will always be washing to do. There will always be, in my case, tumbleweed of dog hairs all over the floor that need hoovering. There's always going to be dust and there's always going to be like grown-up stuff to do. And I'm not advocating that we move ourselves away from that. I mean, yeah, sure, if you want to get a cleaner to help with some of that stuff, things can be outsourced. It doesn't have to be all your job, of course. But the niggles of day-to-day life, instead of removing ourselves from the reality of day-to-day life, my philosophy is about helping you get to the point where you can smile and see the lovely moments in the day, even when there's chaos surrounding you. Because life is going to happen. Life is a mixed bag. But if you can have more good days and more good moments in days than their moments, that's a good thing. But it really starts by being conscious about those choices that you are making. So I call it, get yourself ready for an upgrade. Now, I know you're not a machine. We're not going to start sort of like, it reminds me actually, when I talk about being ready for an upgrade, it reminds me of Doctor Who and the Cybermen, and they get these humans going one end and then you get Cybermen coming out the other and there's like machines and lots of like, mechanical noises. That's not what I'm talking about, of course. I'm not for one moment saying that we're going to turn you into someone who isn't you. Ultimately, you are wonderful and brilliant, made in the image of God. It's not about changing who you are. It's about helping you be more of the person you always were all along. Like, I imagine that if you think back to when you were younger, you probably didn't feel as pent up and frustrated most of the time as you do now. And somewhere along the way, we lose this sense of what it is to be us. I give you a story by way of example. I remember when my eldest daughter, who's now 16, she was in the Maithrin, which is the Welsh word for the reception class. Kindergarten, if you're American, I guess. So she was about, or maybe it's pre-kindergarten. Kindergarten? I've forgotten how to say that word correctly. Anyway, she was about 3, and she'd go to school, in inverted commas. It wasn't school, it was like preschool, for 4 mornings, for a couple of hours every morning. And every term or so, we'd have a little concert. And I remember this one particular occasion, walking into this concert, my husband and I with some of the other parents, and I started to tell a story. And there was this look that my husband gave me. It was like, oh, again, here we go. Because when I tell stories, I tend to do the voices, and it does his head in a little bit. And I think it would be fair to say I'm a bit of a chatterbox. And over the years, there are times when it's like, oh, can't you just shush for a moment? My youngest daughter says it to me as well. They're very like, can't you just stop for a moment? I do it when I'm in the supermarket queue as well. My philosophy is, if I can make somebody else smile even for a few moments, it adds to their pile of good things. I love making people smile. But when I was younger, so going back, over a decade ago, I was still me, but I was a more squashed, confined, less self-expressed version of me. And I would let things like a roll of the eyes from my husband it would send me down into a spin. I would feel squashed and constrained, and it's not a nice feeling. And so somewhere along the way, we kind of lose this sense of who we are, that wide-eyed wonder we had as children. And we just become these squashed adults who fit in boxes and behave in this way we're meant to behave. And personally, I think that's no life at all. I'm not suggesting that you have to be me, not for 1 second. That absolutely isn't what I'm suggesting. I want you to be you, and the aspects that make you, bringing more of those out to play, because that is, in my very biased and not very humble opinion, that is one of the secrets to actual happiness, is being fully self-expressed, showing up as you. This is, I think that's one of the benefits as we get older, I guess, is that we become less bothered by what other people think. This is me, like it or lump it, really. If you don't like it, jog on. But it takes work to get to that point, because we grow up, particularly as women, we grow up being told that, it's important that we are liked and respected, and that, I don't want people to hate me. I'll be quite honest, that's not fun. But, so we lose this sense of what it is to be fully self-expressed. So I call it upgrading, because, and there's 3 aspects to this, and we're not going to dig into all of this in one podcast episode, because otherwise it would be a very, very long episode. But the 3, when I do this work one-on-one, we talk about it in 3 specific areas. I call it upgrading your skills, upgrading your environment, and upgrading your thinking. And I suspect actually we could probably do a podcast episode on each of those 3 aspects, what I really mean by that, and give you some concrete examples. But right now, today, for the purpose of this episode, and actually note to self, I'm going to write that down. We will do that in future podcast episodes. So if you'd like to hear more about what I mean about those, and some practical suggestions for things that you can play with at home on your own, if you're not already subscribe, or you can sign up as well and get email updates when there are new podcast episodes released. And I'll tell you when those episodes come up. That's my quick plug. But for today, I just want to remind you that all of this is baby steps. Because, and this ties in with the Mindset Minute, that's not accidental. The way that the planning, I'm going to give you a sneak peek behind the scenes look at this. The way that the Mindset Minute and the podcast is planned, I sit down with a cup of coffee usually, and okay, right, what's the plan then, God? And ideas pop in my head, and it either starts with, a couple of Mindset Minute ideas that link together to create then a fuller podcast episode, or vice versa. Sometimes the idea for a podcast episode comes along, and then, okay, so how can I bring out smaller aspects of that? That's your quick behind the scenes sneak peek. But we did talk about this. If you listen to the Mindset Minute today, And if you haven't heard that, faithandbusinessplayground.com/MM124. It's mindset minute number 124. I've started numbering them a bit more sensibly, so it's easier to find. But I did talk about and remind you that, to ditch that all or nothing thinking. Baby steps. You can't create change and you can't become more of the person that you were born to be all at once. I mean, you can. Sometimes we have these instant transformations. I've got 2 examples of that. Like when I became vegan, I watched Get Vegucated, and it was an instant click in my head. And from that moment on, right, that's it, I'm not doing it anymore. And the same when I stopped drinking as well. We've got a book that my husband bought himself for his birthday a couple of years ago, 18 months or so ago, Stop Drinking Easily or something like that. I said, well, do you want me to read it? Because it'd be interesting to see what you're reading. Yeah, okay then. And I read it, and again, it was an instant transformation. Right, that's it, I'm not drinking anymore. And I didn't. December the 1st, 2017, and that was it. And I haven't had anything since, and I don't miss it at all. So sometimes change can happen in an instant. You have this some sort of transformation, or something impacts you in a way where it's an instant, okay, that's it. But more often than not, it's a journey. And even those instant transformations, like, there were baby steps associated with it. So when I made that instant decision to be vegan, okay, made the decision, this is happening. But then there's the logistics that go around it. Okay, so what am I going to eat? What am I going to put in my coffee if I'm not drinking cow's milk anymore? There's the planning side of it. Same with drinking as well. As particularly in the UK, but I imagine it's not just the UK, Christmas and all the advertising is drink alcohols, champagne, bubbles, blah, blah, blah. And so it was a month before, just before Christmas when I stopped drinking alcohol. Well, what am I going to drink instead? I don't want to be a party pooper. I don't want to feel deprived. So even when you have that instant transformation, a seemingly blink of the eye, momentous event, there's still planning and thinking and baby steps that go into that. The thought that just popped in my head then actually was Saul as he was. Saul had that amazing road, instant transformation, that moment where, okay, saw and heard Jesus's voice, and it was like that instant, whoa, okay, I'm not gonna go around killing Jesus folk anymore. I'm gonna be with them instead. But what's interesting, and if you've read his story, he didn't go from journeying on the road to Tarsus, Saul of Tarsus, road to Damascus. Yeah, okay. Clearly I need to check that one. Road to Damascus. That's right. Sorry, I'm doubting myself now. This is what happens when ideas pop in your head and you don't have your Bible open in front of you and you don't pause to fact check. But what I do know is he didn't have that moment. And then he traveled on. And do you remember there's the guy who, I'm going to say Ananias, who had to go to Saul and the scales fell off his eyes. He had his sight back. But even after that happened, he didn't then immediately get up and start preaching the gospel. He went away and studied for something like 3 years. He went away and he had all this learning and knowledge in his head that he'd grown up with as a well-regarded Jew and doing Jew stuff. He knew the Bible, or the Torah as it is still. He knew the Torah inside out. He then needed some time to practical thinking it through. Okay, what does this mean in light of this new revelation? So even when you have those instant transformations, there's still baby steps that go alongside it. So that's my biggest takeaway for you from this episode, I guess, is that if you are ready to create change, if you're ready to upgrade those different aspects of your life, I want to caution you, change is possible. Change is, being more of the person you were born to be is entirely possible. But I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't remind you that it's baby steps. You don't need to do all of the things at once. And of course, I would also remind you that if you want support with this, that's the sort of stuff that I help with. And if you want to talk about what that might look like, if you want some practical day-to-day advice on how you can increase more of the lovely things in your day, I have a little mini service for that. If you go to faithandbusinessplayground.com/talk, it's called The Sadness Slayer. It's a free 30-minute, you and I, on Zoom. You can leave our time together sort of inspired, re-energized, renewed, but we're also going to uncover some of those challenges and those blind spots that you've got. So if that sounds like something that you would be interested in, go to faithandbusinessplayground.com/talk. In the meantime, thank you for being here as ever. It's been my pleasure to share this with you. And like I say, if you are interested in hearing more about the upgrade the different aspects of what that looks like, be sure to subscribe or sign up for updates so that you can you make sure you don't miss the next episode. Well, it's not the next one. It'll be in a few episodes' time. Anyway, thank you for listening. I shall catch up with you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.